Thank you, Luke. I feel it must be special because usually Dennis comes much later in the service, so you're here for the whole service. So, yeah, so I feel God's love. So, I just want to say, I want to thank everyone, because even though there's a few people here, I think about all the people that have been a part of my life since I joined our movement. Actually, 45 years ago to the day. It was a Sunday, December 1st, that I signed membership after my first 2-day workshop. And just all the people, my spiritual parents, my elders, my youngers, my friends, my enemies, everybody that was a part of my life, you know, I can't thank all of them. So I just, on behalf of all of them, I want to thank all of you. I also just want to mention before I start that I spoke to Mika yesterday, Pastor Mika, our district pastor, and she wanted to convey something that she felt really bad that when she was here last week and she was the MC that she didn't say. So the first thing she wanted to mention was she wanted to commend us on how lovely the church looked, because she noticed everything, but you know, there was a lot going on last week. So she also she noticed the absence of one person last week, and that was Luke. And she wanted to give like a special shout out and love to you, Luke, for the contribution that you bring. So I just wanted to share that. Then, so as he said, today is my 45th spiritual birthday, and I think for me, on my 40th spiritual birthday, which is what you sort of would normally think, that would be more meaningful than your 45th. That song had just started her chemo. I mean, not her chemo and her radiation. So I don't even think I was aware of my spiritual birthday at that time. So I kind of feel like I'm, in our movement, the number 40 is very significant. I don't think the number 45 is that significant. But I feel like, to me, the way I've been thinking about it, it's sort of as if it were my 40th, even though I have an extra 5 years there. So, there's such a thing called an origin story. And I just wanted to share some of my origin story with you. But before I share it, I just thought I'd give you, let's see, I do this right. This is when I first joined. That's me fundraising in 1975. I have a bunch, I just have some random pictures that I, had, and all my really important ones never, I don't know, maybe the Edgerleys know what this is like, or the Howes, when you first started family, you kept a scrapbook, but by the time more kids came along, they all just sort of, this was before cell phones, your pictures just went in boxes, and then you don't know, where is that picture? I know it's somewhere. So anyway, it's not, oh, I see. No, it's red, it's green. There we go. That's me at workshop at Camp Mazumdar. Actually, Suja right now is at Camp Mazumdar, and there's 3 feet of snow on the ground. So when I sent her that picture, she goes, "Mom, I'm going to recreate it." Okay, somehow Taka. I don't know. It should be on, right? Is it the red? Oh, I see, when the red. This is me in a psychiatric ward of a hospital after I was kidnapped. And I cut my hand, and they decided that I was mentally unstable. So you can see right there. Do you see? This on my right hand is. This is me with Damien Dunkley's mom at the workshop site at Camp K. Do you like the fashion statement there? I don't know what this is my spiritual mother, Poppy Ritchie, at Etna Springs. That's another, just brothers and sisters. That's no, and when I joined in California, and I'll share a little bit more, but when I joined, there were no Japanese members, unlike what a lot of other people experienced. I joined in California, and it was a very different situation. So then, in 1983, Father sent out Japanese sisters to all the centers, and so This was a Mrs. Ono. I was still Catherine Green at the time. I wasn't an Ono. This is Reiko Henkins, and I'm not sure who I think a Sato, but. And then this was when I first came to Boston, and Reverend Chung Gyun Kim was the leader. This is me right back here. And do you know who that is? That is Tommy Noda's mom. This was 1983, or maybe 1984. Already IOWC started. That's singing. This is the Boston Church. So this is, I had the opportunity, this is Reverend Chung Soo-won. He's a 36 couple, and he was a Korean leader here. And we had a first Kausa conference in San Francisco, and he wanted to drive across the country. So the three of us, this was the Japanese brother who translated, and I drove across. And you can imagine when we were in the middle of America, and this tall, like, in those days, I kind of looked like a model. This tall, lovely American woman walks in a restaurant with these two little Asian guys. It was so funny to watch people kind of looking at us. That's Niagara Falls. This was, you know who that is? That's Reverend Busing, right? This is Don Sills. Do you remember Don Sills from back in the day? Yeah. And then this I just put for our youngers. In the olden days, when you had a certificate, they all had to be hand done. There was no computers, so you had to hand calligraphy. So because I could do calligraphy, I got called to all kinds of things. And I would sit in a room with another sister, and we'd have 200 or 300 people attending a conference, and you'd have to write every single person's name. That's how I went to the God and Freedom Banquet, actually. Here is the Boston Church. This is before the wall. This is Ye Suk Lee, who her brothers were in the car with Hung Jin-im. And I think, other than the True Children that were here, she was the first second gen to move into the building in 1984. She was going to BU, and she was kind of upset with the behavior of her roommate, and she kind of desperately came and said, "Can I stay in the church?" So we were very, very close at the time. That's my Homburg there. This is the Boston Church. Bishop Edmonds was one of our big ACLC ministers. Do you remember? No, this is Bruce Williams. And Rick McInerney and Marco Rodriguez, and there's Reverend Busing. And I just thought I would show you. We used to have these Pentecostal kind of things here in the church where some ministers would come and the guys playing would sing "When the Saints Go Marching In," and we'd push all the chairs to the side, and like literally for hours we would just dance around, going around in circles and dancing. And so you can see this little German sister, and this is Chun-Boon Morton here. So we had some wild times here in the Boston Church. Oh, this was just a little close-up. So you could see Tommy's mom better. The same as that, okay. And is that it? Oh, yes, okay, that's it. Taka, you can just take those down now. So I just went through one. Okay, we have more. I guess I did. Okay, so here we are. So this was, you can imagine what this was after we were matched in 1987. This was in between the matching and the blessing in Seattle. And this was our blessing picture. And this was after we were blessed, and I went back to my hometown from here, and this was Zinmun Kim. I think we were somewhere in one of Kings Canyon or something in California. This is when I joined the fish business with my husband, Mr. Izukawa. And this is Hasegawa Mama, for those of you who remember her. I think this is Suja at her first birthday. We did the Korean thing. She grabbed a paintbrush, which is like works as an art director. So this was up in Kodiak giving lectures, going up there. That's Suja and I there. These I just took the picture. I didn't take it out. My whole photo album was falling apart. So this is in Russia giving a testimony. This is my dad. Came to visit when I was pregnant with Song and about 6 months before he died. And this is,
somehow cut the picture off. Songja was in the lap of the Korean leader's wife. So this was us in Seattle. And I think that's, yeah. So those were just from one book. So I just thought I would share those briefly. So anyway, I'm from Northern California, and in 1974, in June of 1974, I graduated from high school. And I had decided to take what we now call a gap year. But in those days, there wasn't any word for it. At least that's what I had told my parents and teachers and friends, that I was taking a gap year. But actually, I was really in a kind of existential crisis at the time. Since maybe around my sophomore year in high school, I really began to think deeply about life, about the world, questions about the nature of God, not the existence of God. The existence of God was never a question for me, but what did God want from my life? Why? I didn't have the word privilege at the time, that kind of word that we use now when you talk about people of privilege. I didn't have that language, but I definitely felt there was something wrong, that I had so much and other people didn't have anything. And I really, by the time I came to my graduation, all I really wanted to do was find out what God's will for my life was, and really, this was before I heard any principle or anything, but all I really wanted to do was really sacrifice myself for the sake of God's will. But I didn't know how that was supposed to look. I lived in a monastery for a while. I lived in a community of these Russian old believers up in Oregon. I traveled around with, you remember the Jesus freaks? Like the kind of Christians that drove around in buses and things. I practiced meditation, I did yoga, kind of everything. I was really searching for purpose and deep purpose. I had gone to a private girls' high school that today, that high school charges $60,000 a year for high school. So it's that kind of place, right? I was going to go to Berkeley, UC Berkeley. So I really had all the opportunity in the world, that I had kind of had everything that the world offers was available for me, but it wasn't what I wanted. And so I was really kind of in despair. I remember after my high school graduation, when usually everybody goes and parties, I went to the Carmel Beach and just wept and called out to God, what do you want me to do with my life? So a few weeks after I turned 18, I had come back home. Also, in all of those travels of mine, I also hitchhiked over a third of the country from Colorado to San Francisco. So I camped in the middle of the Rockies, and my tent was attacked by a bear. I had all kinds of experiences that when I think back of it, I think, I'm sure glad my mom didn't know about some of those things. She would have had a heart attack. And now being a mom, I really have a lot of sympathy with my mom. But anyhow, my mom at the time was the chairman of the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, which was a conglomeration of eight or so seminaries of different religions, different denominations, and other kind of centers and things, and she would go into Berkeley all the time there. And Berkeley was a pretty exciting place in those days. So I was about a week after my 18th birthday, and I decided to go into Berkeley with her, and I walked across Sproul Plaza. Berkeley has got, I think, 35,000 students, and the main plaza is where everybody kind of goes at lunchtime, and that's when I was there. And I started to walk across Sproul Plaza when I saw this funny-looking, this card table with this very tacky-looking display with some pictures on it and a woman sitting there, and it said, Ideal City Ranch. And suddenly I remembered I'd met somebody from there before when I was in high school. So I walked through all of these people, all the way across Sproul Plaza, straight up to this sister, and I said, I know you. You all live in a house together, and you're religious, but you're not religious. I mean, you're not like Catholic or Protestant, but because I had actually met someone when I had been in Berkeley for a Model United Nations conference maybe 2 years before. And she goes, "Oh, you know our family?" And I said, "Yeah, I met somebody." And then she asked me, "So what are you doing?" And I said, "I'm tripping through the cosmos looking for the purpose of my life." Now, for all of the first gen in the room, you can imagine, this was Colette Zielinski, what she felt when this young woman said this to her. She just wanted to I'm sure she just wanted to grab me right then and there. She's like, "Oh, that's interesting." And then we talked about St. Francis and sang songs from Brother Sun, Sister Moon. And I had other plans that evening, so I didn't go to the dinner program. And I went back to Marin County, and there was no public transportation directly from Marin into Berkeley. So it was kind of, you had to, if I didn't have a ride, I had to go through San Francisco, and it's kind of a long trip. But anyway, then I said, the Messiah brought me back to Berkeley, and literal Handel's Messiah. I saw in the newspaper that the Berkeley Community Chorus was going to sing Handel's Messiah, and I always loved that piece of music. I used to put it on and conduct it in my room in the dark. But so I went. They had rehearsals on a Monday and a Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So I thought, I'll go to Berkeley. I'll stay with some of my friends, and then on that Tuesday, I'll go to that place. So I went to the evening program. And in those days, everybody had long hair and beards, and probably Jim had long hair. I kind of had more hair for sure. George as well, probably. But, and nobody wore a tie or anything. But I walked into the Hearst Street house, which is right on the northwest corner of the Berkeley campus. And Berkeley was really crazy in those days. And I walk in, and there's all these guys in white shirts and ties and short hair. I go, "What is this place?" It was so strange. And they roped me into, they had entertainment before the lecture, and they kind of roped me into singing a song with them. And anyway, that was a Tuesday. The following Thursday was Thanksgiving, and the following Friday I went to the 2-day workshop. So exactly the same kind of sequence of days as this year. And in those days, we didn't hear in California, we didn't hear straight divine principle. We had sort of like what the True Family Values ministry presentation is to Christians is to the principle. The principles of education were to the principles for us then. So it was a basic principle, but expressed differently. Like instead of the Fall of Man lecture, it was the Cause of Crimes lecture. And we didn't have the Second Coming lecture. We had something that was more along the lines of the last days and the last 400 years and the role of America. And, America was the center of God's providence. And where did everybody want to go in America? Well, they wanted to go to California. And where was it in California? So it's like you are in the center of the universe. That was like the feeling at the end, But I was so excited. And even though I was only a couple of hours from my home, I went to workshop and I never went home after that. I mean, I joined, and there was never any question for me. And I had a week of just, kind of undiluted joy of listening to the principle. And I know for some of our youngers who heard the principle when you were young, you can't understand what it was like. For me at that time, it was like being on a desert and having no water and finally being able to drink. And even at the second weekend workshop, generally in our movement, if there's lectures and somebody's sleepy, what do? Where do they go? They stand up and go to the back of the room, right? So there were people in the back of the room that were sleepy, but I was so excited I couldn't sit. So I'm in the back of the room, almost Pentecostal, I'm almost jumping up and down, and there's other people falling asleep on their feet. I remember that. But anyway, I just felt so happy and so grateful, and In California, the focus was more, we kind of took a different approach where we didn't testify directly about true parents in the beginning. It was more, we testified more to like we're building the kingdom, and then you'd hear the full Divine Principle lectures. But there was a tremendous emphasis on caring for one another and taking care of each other. So anyway, I joined. The first day that I went fundraising, I ran into one of my mother's friends. So we didn't have cell phones in those days, so I get back to the church center and my mother's calling, "What are you doing on the streets of San Francisco? We didn't pay for you to go to this school, for you to," and I had said to my mother, I explained to her, "Oh yeah, but at first she thought I was just with a family on a farm." That was where the workshop site was. But when I told her, "Oh yeah, this man came from Korea and blah, 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 blah," and my mom goes, "Has this anything to do with Reverend Moon?" And I went, "Yes!" I was so excited. And she went, "Oh, And that was kind of like the end of my innocence. A few days later, my whole family's at the gate. The next weekend, my brothers came up to take me out. It was like that, began a course of really difficulty with my family at that time. And yet it was never, I knew that the world that they had there was nothing there for me. I knew it, I didn't need to hear the principle to know that. I already had known that in my heart. But anyway, I began the life of fundraising, and as I said, I met my mother's friend the first day, and I'm one of the few people that probably really enjoyed fundraising. To me, it was an adventure. And I guess because I was good at it, and I'd had a certain amount of social skills growing up, I knew how to talk to people, so it wasn't like I was shy or nervous. And I had so many adventures. I've been to the northernmost part of Alaska, snuck onto the naval base there. I've fundraised all over Alaska, where we would fly into places. The airplane would land in here, but it would take off the next day across the river, but there was no way to get across the river. You had to find someone to get it. There was no hotel. You had to find a place to sleep. It was really adventurous, going on these tiny little planes to Eskimo villages, and I just had a blast, actually. I had so much fun. And then we would always come back and go witnessing. And if you met someone, then you would go to the workshop. If you didn't meet someone, you would still go to the workshop with someone else's spiritual child. So in my church life, the idea of sharing our faith, of witnessing, was never it was never about me. It was till after I was blessed that I found out that you were supposed to have 3 spiritual children before you were blessed. So we just witnessed because we wanted to help people. We wanted people to know about God. We wanted people to know what their purpose of their life was. And it was, and I also experienced that the going out, having experiences, and coming back and studying the principle, and always gaining new insight and new understanding. So that, to me, the principle never became static. I was always getting new insights and new understanding. It was that first year I met Father for the first time. He came to California. He started speaking at midnight. So somehow, that was rough for many people because we'd been up since 5 o'clock in the morning. But Father started talking about history and the movement of civilizations and all of that. And I loved history in school. And so pretty much everyone in the room was like nodding out except for me. And so all of Father's, kind of energy came to me. And even Father talked about, even if your parents stand against you and you go, somehow Father knew my situation. Later, when I saw Father again after I'd been kidnapped, and the way that I escaped my kidnapping was I took a glass bottle and broke it and gripped it so that I have to be taken to a hospital. Jim's looking at it. This is the Reader's Digest version. But anyway, I have a scar on my thumb. And I remember coming in, we were on a fundraising team, so I was all the way in the back when Father came to the Hearst Street house. And then Father at one point said, any scars that you get in building the kingdom of heaven will shine, in the spirit world, they'll shine. And so I always felt, every time that I saw Father, Father would say something that I felt was directly for me. After 9 years in California, I came to Boston in 1983, and by that I had been blessed, and my husband first husband had left the church, so I really was facing difficulties. And I remember going to God's Day that year, feeling like if I don't connect to true parents in a deeper way, I love the principle, and that had been my sort of motivating force, the motivating force in my life. But I felt like if I can't connect to true parents in a deeper way, in a more personal way, I don't know that I told God, I'm not going to leave, Heavenly Father, I won't leave, but I don't know how well I'll be able to do. And so, and I was one of those crazy people that would wait for hours and hours to see Father. And when I first came to Boston, we went down. I'd go down, and Father was going to speak at 9 in the morning, so everybody started gathering at 6 in the morning. So I thought, well, if everybody's gathering at 6, I have to be there at 5. I was very competitive back in the day. So then everybody started going at 5. Okay, then I have to go at 4. And then one time I remember, this is just a little aside, trying to go to sleep at the New Yorker before Father was supposed to speak, and I think my ancestors said, "What are you doing in bed?" People wait up all night to see Jerry Garcia. That's the Grateful Dead it's the band. What are you doing in bed? Get down there. So it's like 10 o'clock at night. And I got up and I sat down in front of what was that room? The crystal room or the terrace room. Do you remember the terrace room? Yeah, those glass, the terrace room. And then some people say, "You're here already, Catherine?" Okay. And so then so there's just that was I always would want to see true parents. But at that time, that God's Day, 1984, Father was in Danbury, and he came out specifically they let him out to come out for God's Day. And at one point, here's Father in Danbury prison. Really, it's not a good situation. And yet, in my heart was Heavenly Father, I need to connect to true parents somehow more deeply if I'm going to keep going. And at one point during the speech, Father grabbed his chest and he said, "True parents' love is Mooney's milk." He's a man, right? But I felt from that, it was kind of like when in Christianity we talk about grace. Like that Father was saying, "Catherine, your relationship with me is as fundamental as a baby's to its mother's breast. And that's okay." And it's really amazing because that moment that Father said that was captured by one of the photographers. So you can see this picture of Father going talking, and then he's talking, and it's very clear from it that he's speaking directly to me. So that was very meaningful, that experience. So, so the 1980s was really characterized in my relationship with true parents by waiting for hours and hours to see Father and sitting right in front and having that kind of very, close and intimate experience with true parents. Meanwhile, that's the time we were all visiting ministers, beginning to visit ministers and all of that. And then in the late 80s, I was matched to my husband, and then we were blessed in 89. Anybody here? 89 blessing? Yay! Stayed in Korea for 3 months, and later, after I was blessed and pregnant with Suja, Father asked us all to go to foreign countries, so I went to New Zealand for 40 days. That was quite an experience. And then in the 90s, most of the 90s I lived in Seattle or in Portland, Oregon. So the 90s was all in the Northwest. And it was early in the 90s that I first had a relationship with True Mother. And that was during the True Parents in the Completed Testament Age tour. Anybody remember that tour? That was, Mother had gone the year before Women's Federation had started, and Mother had visited a few cities in America. But in 1993, Father spoke publicly for the first time since the 70s. And then he spoke in probably, 12 cities, and then asked Mother to go to all the states. So in New England, if you're, like, what's the farthest away city of somebody coming to Boston? Like Vermont, right? I think it's Vermont, for a city center. So Alex Nimick tends to have the longest drive. That's the closest city in the Northwest. If you're going from Seattle to Portland, it's 3 or 4 hours, right? So if you're going from Seattle to Idaho, it's a 10-hour drive. To Montana's an 18-hour drive. To Alaska, you have to fly. And Mother was going to all of those cities. And I was pregnant with Songja at the time. And we went to everything. And but the big problem was when Mother was going to speak in Idaho, there were only 3 families in Idaho. One was the restaurant members, one was the AFC brother, and there was another couple that was like struggling and not really going to church. So our Reverend Eugene, he was so worried about how that event was going to go. So how could we get members from Seattle to go to Idaho? So he took myself and another sister out to lunch, and he's like, what are we going to do? And anyway, then I had this thought, well, let's make a little children's choir. Because if the kids go, then if the kids are going to sing for True Parents, then the parents are going to want to come, and we'll get more that way. And so he said, good idea. So we formed a little choir. Aki Mas was the youngest. She was 5 years old at the time. We sang Omaya Nunaya and God Bless America. Wasik Che, whose dad was the leader in Kodiak, played piano, and she kind of led she gave us the musical guidance, but we didn't, and nobody sang in harmony or everything, but we practiced walking back and forth. We practiced bowing, so they were really tight, And it came out, and we sang for Mother, and then the Korean leader, and then during the victory party, they all gathered around Mother. Mother hugged all the kids and pictures, and that's the picture. I don't know where it is, somewhere in amongst all my pictures. But then this Reverend Yu asked Mother to name the choir. Now, at that point, everywhere Mother went, there were choirs of second gen that were singing, like the New Jersey choir, this or that. Maybe we were the only ones without a name. But Eugene He asked Mother to name the choir. So Mother named the choir the Sun Hak Choir. So that's the origin. That was the first time that now there's the Sun Hak Peace Prize, there's the Sun Hak Institute for da-da-da-da, but it all started in Idaho. I think that's worth an applause, please. So Mother told us that the Sun Hak Choir should improve and learn Korean. And I was pregnant with Songja at the time, and I didn't know it. I'm not a musician, but I was determined to keep it up. So for a while, Wasuk was around, and we started learning Korean songs. And then, we were working towards God's Day, a big God's Day performance. And this is Mother's choir, right? Well, the day of our last practice, I was pregnant with Song at the time. The morning of, my water broke. Had to go and I'm like, I can't have a baby right now. I can't have a baby right now. I have to have this final rehearsal because this is Mother's choir. And so I was okay. I went back, but I stuffed all these diapers, like cloth diapers, in my pants and went to the church and had my rehearsal and then came home. But that's kind of how crazy I am. But I also felt that at that time I also visited I went to all of Mother's speeches, and I felt like that was part of Song's foundation and her own relationship with Mother. Because this kind of crazy foundation. But anyhow, I had that experience. And then in 96, at that time, Mother was speaking round and around and around, right? There was the origin of the universe and what's that? There were 2 speeches that Mother gave one and Peter Kim gave the other. And afterwards, I sang a song in Korean for Mother. And at that time, I had been working in the fish business. And it was when I was matched to a Japanese brother, then suddenly the whole realm of the Japanese members kind of opened up to me. Because before I was just, I didn't, we're all brothers and sisters, but I didn't have like that close relationship with Japanese members. But after I was matched, then suddenly, kind of things were different. And then when I joined my husband, then I went and I worked in the fish business, and I really got to know many Japanese members and Japanese leaders, and it felt like a mission to me. But after I sang this song for True Mother, then the next day, Mother asked Yu Jin-hee, again, same Korean leader, does that sister have a mission? And he goes, no. I mean, I was like being paid less than minimum wage and working. To me, it felt like a mission. But he said, give her a mission. Mother said, give her a mission. So suddenly everything changed. I went from working in the fish business to working for the church. I was like the regional secretary. And from there to becoming the state leader of Oregon. And from there, going to after they sent a seminary graduate at one point, then going to some program in Chicago where I saw some of the ministers from Boston, and I guess there was this Korean at the table. I didn't pay any attention to him, but it was Reverend Kim, our Reverend Kim, and Reverend Kim sees me talking with these ministers and everything, and the next thing I know, I've been asked to, come to Boston. So there's there's a direct line, from like my public work goes directly to Mother. Because otherwise, I think without those experiences, I would have just, probably continued working in the fish business. Also, as a result of that, I had amazing experiences with True Parents. I felt like even before I was a leader, when I was just the regional secretary, they needed someone to go to a God's Day celebration. We only had money to send the Korean leader. The Korean leader calls me, do you want to go to God's Day in South America? Yeah. Okay, well, you have to you have to pay for it. So I went fundraising, and I had this just incredible experience afterwards, just very intimate experience with True Parents, no more than 10 people for a week. And I felt like that I had those experiences from the force of my heart and my love, not because I was in some position. And through my being in our movement, I've traveled all over the world. I counted. I think I've worked with over 10 Korean leaders, from 36 couples all the way to 6,500 couples. I've gotten to know so many people, so many different experiences, and what's kind of sustained me over that time was, because I've also had, real heartache and difficulties. I remember when Song was diagnosed with cancer, and I thought, well, Heavenly Father, my parents, turned against me. My first husband turned against me. I'm not turned against me, but that there was like a break in those relationships with my parents, my husband, my siblings. I guess now it's time to sort of challenge the child. And yet, through all of the difficulties that I ever faced, there was some way that God would speak to me through the principle or through True Parents' words or St. Augustine, so that I could experience joy. I forgot to send Taka the title. I wrote it that my title is 45 Years of Comfort and Joy. I originally thought of sorrow and joy, but because it's Christmas time, there's that one of the God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen, I think, and it's like comfort and joy. So when one feels sorrow, when does one feel comfort? Usually if you're sad, right? But I would always be able to experience Heavenly Parents' love for me, and I could experience joy in some way. I just want to read a couple of quotes to you. This was from Father, I'm not sure, I had it written at home, but I'm not sure what the date is. But until now, we have attended true parents only in sorrow and pain. But from now on, we should attend them in joy and freedom. And I can remember when I was still a young member, after I had been kidnapped, and my parents were against me, and it was a really difficult time. I would listen to, I'd cry so much during lectures that my eyes were chapped underneath, listening to God's, thinking about God's situation. It's like the salt dried out underneath my eyes. But at one point I thought, well, if I really want to comfort God, then God's original heart was one of joy, expectation of joy. So I should be joyful. So at a very young age of the church, I realized that no matter what I experienced, I had to shift things so that I could be joyful, to bring joy to God, and even for myself. And yesterday I was listening to NPR, and they were interviewing one guy that played the Fonz, I think it was, Henry Winkler. And they asked him, do you have a saying? And he said this: I live by two words, tenacity and gratitude. Tenacity, which is kind of a word meaning like determination, or like someone who's tenacious, holds on, doesn't let go. Tenacity gets you where you want to go, and gratitude doesn't allow you to be angry along the way. And I kind of felt that was very similar to what God had taught me. To go in our life, no matter what, if you're a movie, you're a Unification Church member, or you're, a movie star, a television star, you have to have determination. You have to have a kind of willpower. And yet, if that's tempered with gratitude, no matter what you experience, you can maintain your equilibrium, and you can be joyful. I spent a part of yesterday and today watching some of the videos of True Mother and reading some of the letters, the reports, and it's like pretty inspiring to see like a huge area of people all getting blessed, and prime ministers and presidents of countries greeting Mother, and Cambodia was especially poignant for me because I remember Yuka. Who remembers Yuka? Yuka, who got blessed to a brother from Cambodia. I wonder if Yuka's in there somewhere, And even like the story of Cambodia, the horrible history that it had under Pol Pot, and like a quarter of the population was just murdered. And here they are, receiving our true parents. And, watching, Bismarck's, I guess, Bismarck, because Bismarck's from Ghana, then he has all these connections to of just friends that that happen to be wherever Mother is, and they're like taking their phone, and then Bismarck posted one of Mother coming off a plane. I guess it was in Niger. I can't remember. Yeah, Niger, and then going around, and bands and all kinds of stuff going on, and yeah, the long red carpet, and that's inspiring. And I saw little shots of Kathy Rigney, and I think what the brothers and sisters, the kind of investment that the brothers and sisters had to make in order for that to happen. I know what that's like. I remember the 50-state tour when I was the state leader of Oregon, and there really wasn't a whole lot of witnessing going on. And I would drop the kids off at school and leave and come home after 11 every night. Just visiting, talking, just desperate, to fill the room. So and all the events that we had here, and RFK Stadium and Madison Square Garden, and all of those kind of, events, I know that kind of, what that takes. And I really, I admire, I'm thinking wow, this is really what these brothers and sisters have done. But I also know that that's not everything. That's not everything. And I know that the spirit world can work to help us get somewhere, to have something happen. And yet at a certain point, though, it comes back to kind of a little bit what Luke was saying. How are the relationships? And can God continue to work past those big, events? And I I know that for myself, I fell very short in that over the years, and it was only really after Song got sick that kind of focus, started to come into focus for me. And even just this week, I had an insight as to how kind of still, how narrow my way of thinking is. So it was Thanksgiving last week, right? And Suja's in California, and the Mosses weren't going to come over, and we didn't have, there wasn't anybody to have Thanksgiving with. And, my husband, even last year when we had Christmas, we didn't really get into Christmas so much. It's been a little difficult since Song died to kind of know how to deal with Christmas. But I really love Christmas, and we didn't have to put up a tree. And my husband never even noticed that we didn't put up a tree, And so it's a little bit like, feeling, kind of like you didn't even notice, because Christmas is, for us Americans, there's a lot of emotion, a lot of feeling around those holidays. And so I was feeling a little bit like, my husband hadn't asked me, well, what's going on for Thanksgiving? And, so I was feeling a little bit resentful or whatever. And then suddenly I thought, well, Catherine, you don't have any idea what Japanese holidays are important to him. And suddenly I thought about all of our Japanese members, of all of our Japanese first gen who came here, and then, their Christmas is not part of this culture. And I'm not even aware that whatever is like, if it's Golden Week or, I don't know, you have whatever those are, there's probably some holiday that carries a lot of emotion and feeling and sentiment to our Japanese members. And I never, ever even thought about that. So I thought, okay, next year we have to have a conversation. I have to find out what it is, and we are going to celebrate. I think there's that one where you all go up to the Takahashi's restaurant up in Newburyport. But anyway, I feel like, I just felt so like how unaware am I? And how are we building the kingdom of heaven if I don't even have that kind of, artistic awareness of other people that I've been with day in and day out for years? So I think I'm sorry I spoke a little longer than I intended, but I feel like for me, as I look back on these 45 years, I'm so grateful for all the experiences I've had. I'm so grateful for having met true parents, not just theoretically, but literally. And that although my faith is not as kind of starry-eyed and naive and, what's the word? Yeah, maybe just starry-eyed and naive, as when as it was for many years, it's much deeper. And my appreciation and my gratitude for what it is that we're actually trying to do here hasn't changed. And for that, I feel very grateful that I still have that same, the kind of same burning in my heart that I had when I joined. I still have, although it's tempered by more, it's more tempered by reality and by an understanding of really what it is that we're doing. And so I wanted to just read one. Taka, did you get this? No, okay, I maybe didn't get it to you in time, I'm sorry. I wanted to read, just in closing, my favorite passage, my favorite hundoke. Everyone should have their favorite hundoke, I think, something that really resonates to them. But this is from The Heart of Reunion that Father gave on September 11th, 1977. Your whole purpose for reaching the center is to meet the heart of God. That experience is so overwhelming and exciting that you cannot disappear there forever, but must emerge again to embrace your family, society, nation, and world. As you touch each of those areas, you will always leave a bit of the kingdom of heaven. This is the joy in the heart of reunion. The East and West are meeting here today, not merely because we want to see each other for personal reasons, but because the heart of God is linking us together into one. Words cannot describe that heart too well, for it is beyond words. Intuitively, you can understand that something is what warmed your hearts and brought you here today. If the heart of God is not moving within your heart, then you feel empty, even though you may be a member of the Unification Church. Once the invisible but powerful axis of the heart of God is moved out of you, everything becomes empty. Once the heart of God dwells within you, no matter how lonely you may be, you will be filled and the universe will be filled. A person who is completely filled is a joyful person because he lacks nothing. Once you have felt the heart of God, you feel that you cannot survive if it should ever leave you. And until you are reunited with God's heart, you feel lifeless. Often a child will dearly love his mother and want to be home just to be with her. If he runs home one day and finds all his brothers and sisters home but his mother is gone, then he will grumble and say, "Nobody is home." Everyone else may be there, but if his mother is gone, then to him it seems that nobody is home. If there is a center of love, then you can give love unselfishly and without limit, and you can become a subject of love. When you give out of the fullness of this love, you multiply love and can realize the ideal. Love transcends distance and time. The speed of light is nothing compared to the speed of love. You have no idea how fast love travels. Love is fastest, brightest, fullest, and sweetest. Love is the best of everything in all the universe. Only through the power of love can this miracle occur, not through bullets or threats. The Unification Church's philosophy and conviction are connected to the center of the universe and the heart of love. We shall become the shining examples of that love and heart. I want you to realize that each of you can possess the highest thing, the brightest thing, and the sweetest thing, and the fullest thing. Let's pray. Our beloved Heavenly Parent, I want to thank you for today. Personally, Heavenly Parent, I want to thank you for guiding and protecting my life, my entire life, and trusting me with meeting our true parents, meeting the divine principle, trusting me that this beautiful gift I will cherish it, and no matter what the obstacles or difficulties, the struggles, the doubts, the disappointments, those are a part of life, whether we're in the church or not. But in spite of all of that, you trusted that I would remain faithful and loyal, and also happy and hopeful, inspired, and really consistent in loving you and in loving others. Heavenly Parent, this is such a beautiful trust that you've placed not just in me, but in each one of us. And that you've taken the most precious thing that you have, your ideal, your hope, your love, and our true parents, and entrusted us with that very same gift. I want to pray for the health and strength of not just our true parents, but of all of our brothers and sisters as we walk this course, that everyone, Heavenly Parent, can feel your personal care and love for them, and they can feel their personal love for you and care for you. Because Heavenly Parent, without that, as Father mentioned in this reading, then everything becomes empty. Sometimes the heart of God does seem to move away from us, or that we just have to go through stuff. But we really want to pledge our loyalty to you and our consistency in having that tenacity to just keep going regardless of what we're going through, and to be grateful through that time. Heavenly Parent, I don't know that I can say I look forward to the next 45 years. That might be a little ambitious, but I really look forward to the next decades of my life and this beautiful and wonderful journey that you've brought me on and my family and all my brothers and sisters. And I really am determined, Heavenly Parent, that regardless of whatever challenges we meet, that we can create a beautiful life and a beautiful ideal for you to experience. I thank you now, and I offer this report in the name of Hiromi and Catherine Ono, a blessed central family. Adieu.